On today's show, why the Houston Rockets are locks to make the playoffs despite a stacked Western Conference, and why it is absolutely a make or break season for Jaylen Green. It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We have something a little bit different for you, though. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, just $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So right now, head on over to FanDuel.com. Take a look at all the wagers for this upcoming season. You can take a look at who's going to win MVP, Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man of the Season awards. Take a look at who's going to win the NBA Cup, or head on over and take a look at who's going to win the NBA Finals. Right now, the Boston Celtics still favorites to repeat at plus 300. OKC Thunder not far behind them at plus 700. You got the 76ers and Knicks tied up at plus 900 to win the title this next season. And the Denver Nuggets and Dallas Mavericks both right there at plus 1100. So go check out those odds, find a wager you like, and then get access to NFL Sunday Ticket. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And now, as the host of Locked On Rockets, it's me, Jackson Gatlin, who you can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Here to break down why the Houston Rockets are absolute locks to make the playoffs in the Western Conference, despite it being an absolute bloodbath out west this upcoming season, and also why it's a make or break year for Jaylen Green. Let's start with the Jaylen Green stuff, because the Rockets' success this upcoming season is largely going to be contingent on which version of Jalen Green they get. Because you go back to this past season, and it was the first year under new head coach Ime Udoka, and credit to Udoka and the coaching staff. They had a lot of patience with Jalen Green. And also I want to give some credit to Jalen Green, because of all the young Houston Rockets on this roster, it was probably the hardest adjustment for him to go from the Steven Silas era of Rockets basketball that they were playing, the down years, the garbage dumpster fire years, whatever you want to call it, into the expectations, the winning basketball that was being played in Houston last year. Ime was very candid about the fact that he had to break down a lot of the bad habits that this team picked up throughout those losing seasons and then build them back up as winning players to really instill good winning mentality, winning habits in these guys. And I think that was probably the hardest adjustment for Jalen Green, but he took it in stride. Across the season last year, we saw Jalen Green improve as a defender. We saw him improve as a playmaker, as a decision maker. We saw him get better and more comfortable offensively, more sure of himself, more confident. The issue with Jalen throughout this point in his career, 3 seasons in, has been his offensive inconsistency. There have been a lot of games where Jalen Green is just a flat-out non-factor on the offensive end of the floor, where he just cannot buy a bucket, where he can't get himself going, where he can't manufacture points by getting to the free throw line. But then the inverse of that is there have been games where he looks like a bona fide future superstar, where you see the talent on display, you see the insane highs, the insane peaks in his game. Pardon me. And that's why there's still hope and cautious optimism that he can tap into that version of himself more often. And if he can eliminate some of the lows in his game, some of the games where he just flat out struggles, where he's unable to get himself going in any capacity offensively, then you're talking about a guy who's at least borderline flirting with being an all-star caliber player. And I think that version of Jalen Green, the version that we saw to close out the season last year, the version who was on an absolute tear in the month of March, leading the Rockets to an 11-game winning streak despite having lost their best player in Alperen Sengun a little bit earlier that month. That's the version of Jalen Green that I think we're more likely to get to start this upcoming season. And one of the reasons for that is the pressure's absolutely on for Jalen Green. He's up for a contract extension this summer, and the Rockets, all signs are pointing to the fact that they have zero intentions of extending him this offseason. He's one of the remaining members of the 2021 draft class, at the top of the draft class, I should say, that has yet to receive a contract extension, and for good reason. This needs to be the prove it year for Jalen Green. He has to go out there and show the Rockets he is worth a rookie max extension or a rookie max contract, and he's going to have to go earn his next contract. So if he struggles this season, not only is he potentially playing for his spot in the lineup with other young guns like Cam Whitmore and Amin Thompson kind of breathing down his neck for that position in the starting lineup, but he's also playing for his own livelihood, for his NBA future, for his very next contract. So this is absolutely a make or break season for Jalen Green with the Houston Rockets. However, again, it feels like he's poised for success. He went through the trials and tribulations. He went through all the learning last year. Ime Udoka took time to break him down and build him back up. So he is ready for a breakout season this upcoming year with the Rockets. And that's going to be a big part of the Rockets' success this next season, is how good Jalen Green can be for this team. Alperen Sengun was already playing at an all-star level this past season. If Jalen Green can match or exceed a similar level of production in his role, and the Rockets essentially have two borderline all-star caliber talents as well as the rest of their supporting cast, I don't see how this team doesn't have another considerable uptick in the win column. They're coming off a 41-41 season, where they just barely missed the NBA play-in tournament conversation, and that was despite the fact that they lost their best player at Alperen Sengun for the final quarter of the season, and they also didn't have Tari Eason, who is a monumentally impactful player for this Rockets squad. He only played about a quarter of the games last season, and he played those games on a bum leg, no less, a really weird situation where Tari Eason had a benign tumor growing on his leg. He had an injury in preseason that aggravated the leg. He had this it was a weird on and off again, minutes restriction, no minutes restriction, and then eventually they had to do surgery on it, shutting him down for the year. But despite playing on a bum leg, and in the limited amount of time that Tari Eason did play last season, he was so impactful. So getting him back on the roster for this upcoming season, which all signs point towards he's healthy, he's good, he's on schedule to be available for the Houston Rockets this next campaign. In the minutes that he played last season, he only played a quarter of the games, but in those minutes, the Rockets were a whopping almost 12 points better per 100 possessions when Tari Eason was on the floor versus when he was off the floor. So getting him back is going to be massive. But one other significant addition that I don't think enough people are talking about or paying attention to is one Steven Adams that the Houston Rockets traded for just ahead of the trade deadline last season. A lot of people forget Steven Adams was a huge part of the Memphis Grizzlies in the 2 seasons that they made it to the top of the Western Conference and finished as the 2 seed out west. And that's because Steven Adams has a huge impact on the offensive efficiency of the teams that he's on. Adams is a fantastic screener. There's no doubt about that. It's one of the best things that he brings to the table as a big. He is an absolutely elite screening presence. And what that screening does is it makes life easier for the primary ball handlers on his teams, right? Whether it's Russell Westbrook, whether it's John Morant, or now with the Houston Rockets, it's going to be largely Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green benefiting from those screens. And what that does is it allows easy downhill driving lanes. It also frees up players for high quality 3-point looks, because you don't fight over a Steven Adams screen. You pretty much have to go under a Steven Adams screen. You're not going to get around him. He's a mountain of a human being. And when that happens, it generates high quality looks, and the proof is in the pudding. In the past 2 seasons that Steven Adams was healthy and playing for the Memphis Grizzlies, the Grizzlies shot almost a insane 4% better from long distance when Steven Adams was on the floor versus when he was off the floor. On the floor for the Grizzlies, they shot 37.56% from downtown. When Adams was off the floor, that percentage dropped almost 4 whole points down to 33.82%. So Steven Adams absolutely impacts the offensive efficiency of the teams that he's on. The Grizzlies' offensive rating, same minutes on off, 120.51 points per 100 possessions when Adams was on the floor versus just 112.84 points per 100 possessions when he was off the floor. So almost an 8-point swing there in offensive efficiency on and off for Steven Adams. And that's the area where the Rockets struggled most last season. When Ime Udoka came in, he was very candid about the fact that he wanted to clean up the defense. The Rockets were one of the worst defenses in the NBA throughout the Steven Silas era. Ime Udoka came in, and the Rockets turned it around. They adopted his defense-first mentality. and his philosophy towards, really buying in on that side of the floor. And they flirted with being a top 5 defense for most of the season. They finished as the 10th best defense in the NBA last year throughout the regular season, but they were just 20th in offensive efficiency. So you're telling me that this Rockets team is going to be able to add a guy in Steven Adams who absolutely improves and increases the overall offensive output and efficiency of a team that really struggled to shoot the 3 ball, that struggled with its offensive efficiency last year. That was the biggest weakness of this team. And you're going to add a guy who gives you 15 to 20 minutes of quality backup center play behind Alperen Şengün to the mix. And that was an underrated part of this past season, is the Rockets just didn't have a backup big behind Şengün that could kind of keep things trucking along. They had to rely on Jeff Green, who, shout out to Uncle Jeff. He's awesome and he's great in his role, but I don't think he was expecting to be the full-time backup 5 when he signed up to join the Houston Rockets last offseason. They lacked a screening presence. They lacked a true backup big behind Alperen Şengün. So Steven Adams kind of answers that question. You're getting Tari Eason back, who his impact cannot be understated for this team. And then for a team that struggled to shoot the basketball as much as they did, they went out and drafted the best shooter in the draft in Reed Sheppard, who's going to be getting the backup minutes behind Fred VanVleet on night 1 of the season. So you look across the board at a team with so much young talent and exciting young core 7, including Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore, and most recently Reed Sheppard. The veteran addition of Steven Adams, getting Tari Eason back and having him healthy this upcoming season. It's hard to imagine the Rockets not being able to take another significant step forward in the win column. And you start taking a look out west, how do the Rockets carve out a spot in that top 10 in the Western Conference? How do they guarantee themselves a spot? I think there are a couple different teams that you could look at that are poised for some regression this upcoming season. I think very clearly you could look at teams like the LA Clippers and the New Orleans Pelicans, who have some significant question marks about their roster construction moving forward. Obviously, losing Paul George is going to be a significant blow to the Clippers. There's still the concern and the health for Kawhi Leonard, obviously. And then the Pelicans still don't have a center. They don't have that situation figured out. The Brandon Ingram situation is going to drag into the regular season. That seems like a powder keg or a situation kind of just waiting for something to go wrong. And then there are a couple older teams in the West that could be, phasing out sooner rather than later. I think you have to take a hard look at the Lakers and just the age of their overall roster, and did they really improve enough this offseason? And then same thing goes for the Golden State Warriors, right? Are they about to fall off even further, right? Are we going to see some regression from Steph Curry and Draymond Green? And did they improve enough despite losing Klay Thompson this past offseason? And again, they only finished just barely in that 10th seed with 46 wins. I think it's very clear the Rockets are poised to take another step forward this season, and they're firmly going to be in the mix in the playoffs in the Western Conference. But for more musings on the Houston Rockets and whether or not they will be locks for the playoffs and what happens ultimately with Jaylen Green this upcoming season, you can track me down over at Locked On Rockets.